I'd like to share some thoughts. Seems everybody's doing this on YouTube anymore, so I guess I'll share mine. I had a terrific uncle, my father's brother-in-law. The guy was the smartest ass in the world I've ever met. This guy could make anybody laugh, and he could zing you in a minute. He told me a story once, and it may have been apocryphal, it may have been urban legend. But supposedly there was this world's smartest guy, biggest problem solver in the world, and he was brought in on a very important task. Must have been the mid-1950s. This skyscraper was having a problem with people getting mad because the elevator wasn't going fast enough to take them up to work. So they brought him into the top floor and they asked him, "Can you solve it?" He says, "I don't know anything about elevators." He said, "It doesn't matter. You're the world's smartest guy. You look at the elevator and you tell us what you think we need to do." He says, "Yeah, but I'm going to ream you. I'm going to charge you out the ass." They said, "No problem. We just need this problem solved." So he got his clipboard, took the executive elevator down to the lobby, and he sat there at the time that people were just arriving for work. Sat there for an hour, took notes. Came back at lunchtime after having gone up to the executive dining room. Said, "Everything's under control. I just want to look at it again at around 12:30. So he goes down when people are coming back from work, coming back from lunch. He says, "I got the problem solved." They said, "What's the problem? We need the solution." He says, "You need to put copper plating on the front doors of the elevators." They looked at him like he was crazy. He said, "Let me explain." He said, "You don't have an elevator problem. You have a pissed off people problem. Everybody's upset that they have to wait additional minutes while the elevator is doing as fast as it can. Otis, whoever made the elevator, is just doing the best they can. But if you put copper plating on the front doors of the elevator, there isn't a man alive in the 1950s who wouldn't be checking his tie. There isn't a lady who wouldn't be checking her coif, wouldn't be looking at her makeup. And by the time it's all said and done, the elevator opens up, the seas part, and they go back up to work." He handed him his findings and a bill for $10,000. So goes the story. The problem that we have today seems to be about people making it. There's just not enough money getting filtered down to people, even in this economy with Trump. I'm very pleased with Trump. But I grew up in the 70s and I came of age in the 80s, and with my experience, I have found that wages for the average schlub are not going up as fast as they might. And there is about a 40-year backlog of wanting to make money. So what I'm going to say here, understand that I founded the International Brotherhood of Recovering Liberals. I was a pretty much lost cause until about 2005, 6, 7. So, but anybody who knows me now will know that what I'm going to say is pretty much heretical thinking. But I actually think there's something to this $15 an hour minimum wage. And the SIU may actually be onto something. Before I get too deep, let me explain that I had open heart surgery in 2018, so I'm a medical miracle. In early 2019, I came up with the conclusion that there are people in this world who have real problems, and I'm not one of them. Now, my little diatribe here is going to get a little windy, or you could say windy. It's going to get a little bit verbose. But one thing leads to another, and I hope it reaches some natural conclusion. Basically, the average worker is pitted against the world, which means that the family is pitted against the world. I think you'll see at the end of this that it really comes down to to family, vision for what one wants, what's best for the tribe. It comes down to self-control, self-reliance, and shared sacrifice. My morning started off when I walked out of a job that I had just started. I'm retired, I'm doing well with the state, I got my nut made. But after a year of playing with my granddaughter, I realized, you got to get out of the house. So I took a job stocking shelves in the health and beauty aisle at a local, regional, significant grocery store. I was working along some young lady who did what could be called training. It really wasn't. It was, here, monkey see, monkey do, and here's what I've learned. Well, we got to know each other, and there's nothing that this young lady and I have in common. She's a young black girl, 29 years old, 7 biological children, 6 from some man who left her after 10 years, and now another child, and she's living alone, and she's taking care of an aged grandmother who's missing a leg. Like I said, there are people with real problems. I'm not one of them. But fast forward to the fact that we agreed that she was leaving that day and I wasn't long behind her. I said, this is really kind of complex, and for anybody who's ever done that kind of work, when you learn what people who are doctors, lawyers, and Indian chiefs take for granted, when you learn those kinds of jobs, you realize there's a natural skill set to that people aren't willing to pay for. All they want is their Chardonnay. And they want their Chardonnay to be on the aisle by 5 o'clock on Friday when they get off work. I find out they're paying me $10.20 an hour. I tell it to this girl. She said they're only paying me $9.85, which plays to the fact that young women don't get paid as much. Or maybe they thought I was a wise, gray-headed old man and I was worth paying a little bit more. I don't know. But I know it helped her make that final decision to walk out the door, and I don't blame her. I am not a proponent of government controls, and I'm not a proponent of minimum wage. Thomas Sowell said it's a bad idea. Look them up, find it, do your own research. But it turns out that really the minimum wage should be about $15 an hour, which is all in the news, which is wrecking some urban environments where they can't find any workers. They can't keep people they're cutting staff. Today's minimum wage is $7.25, and it won't cut it. The practical minimum wage is more like the $11 an hour that I was making when I was driving for an auto parts distributor. I was working at the local warehouse here in town. Again, just trying to stay busy. But it's $11, and all you really have to do is look at the temp jobs that are posted, and everybody's paying $10, $11, $12. If you have a little skill set, if there's a little bit more value added, you'll make $14 or $15, and that's where you can actually make a living. Now, $15 an hour, that's $30,000 a year. And a young person alone will probably have to get a roommate. Nothing wrong with that. People do it all the time. You're not entitled to your own room, son. Share the bills. But if it's a married couple, both people are going to have to work. And if you don't have much of a family support system, which I may tap into a little bit here, you'll find out that you're letting the state raise your children. I don't mean you should spoil your children by giving them everything. What I mean is that the school system will make it so that your children think that nothing is required of them. I think what young children want is direction and a firm hand. Boys and girls should start doing the laundry at 6 or 7, taking all the laundry down there, folding the laundry. Little 4-year-olds can set the table. 6 and 7-year-olds should be able to clear the table, throw everything in the dishwasher, wipe down the table. Make any accommodations you need. Get little stools so kids can reach the sink. Tell them to empty the trash bag when it's emptier and then have them walk it out to the street. But give young people chores. I started working for my father in a restaurant that we had when I was about 10, but I seriously got paid when I was starting at about 12, 15. I was a dishwasher. There was no machine. These were the dishes. These were the dishwashers. And I did that from the age of 12 to 15, and my father taught me some valuable lessons. I remember that he was paying me $15 a day for about a 10-hour day. And I said, Dad, I'm only working this one day when the man isn't working because you're giving him 5 and you're giving me 1. And my brother and I shared the jobs. We'd work every other weekend. I'd say, Dad, how much do you pay the other man? He says, $17.50 a day, which was minimum wage. It's like $19.75. I said, Dad, how come you're paying the other man $17.50, but you're only paying me $15? And he looked at me deadpan. He says, 'cause I can. That was my father. And then at the end of that first summer's week, when I worked the entire week, because he gave the man a week off, he paid me $90. And I remember he put the money in an envelope the way people used to do. You might get it at a bank that way. And I remember I was very excited. I got this $90 and I was going to buy the world with this $90. And I was putting down 20, 40, 60, 80. My eyes are getting wider. 90. How much you giving your mom? First words out of my father's mouth. How much you giving your mom? I said, why? He says, you like to eat? Very valuable lesson there. As for earnings today, there's nothing wrong with a second job, a side gig. People talk about side gigs all the time. There's probably a sidegig.com. Those that I see that are in control of their lives are doing this. Most immigrants do these things. They work second jobs. I have a friend that I taught English. Hey, newsflash, he's here illegal. I know it. He's a great guy. I'm confused. The guy helps me with everything. I should turn the guy in. I should turn in the company that's hired him. Bottom line is, if we fired all the Mexicans doing all the work, there wouldn't be any concrete poured. Because I finished up my last job at a steam plant at one of the state universities. Those 20-somethings aren't going to bust their ass pouring concrete. Which is another problem. We're sending too many people to college. We have over $1 trillion in accumulated student debt? And all you have are pajama boys with soft hands living downstairs doing something on the computer, playing video games. But the bottom line is, most immigrants bust their ass. And those with a good family culture, and I'm talking about the Mexicans and the Pakistanis, they keep their elders around, close to home. They help raise the children. They help the women with the house chores. Maybe the men, the older men, mow the lawn. I don't know. Do the Mex-Pac math. I don't care. They seem to make it work. And they seem happier. Compare that to native-born Americans, mostly white, affluent whites, could be in the black community, I don't know, who expect the world to fix their problem with a phone call and a credit card. It's going to solve all the problems. I know this one tough old bird at the steam plant where I worked, Phil T. You see, I left industry after 16 years to go into teaching for 16 years. And I had to get out of teaching. I was going to take off a kid's head one day. I just didn't know the kid or the day. It wasn't going to end well. I graduated from the Merchant Marine Academy at Kings Point, New York, and I could operate boilers. It turns out I could operate steam plants 30 years after having last walked out of a steam plant. I was a degreed engineer, a ship's officer in the Merchant Marine, a Naval Reserve officer, and I remember joking with a friend of mine who's a retired United Airlines test pilot who'd come up as an electrician, become a pilot, and has done very well. I remember talking to him one day. It was a Saturday, and I called him up. I said, you know, Ken, I should have gotten a trade. He said, you did. And I dope slapped myself, and I realized I had a trade. Well, fast forward 4 years, I had open heart surgery, and I couldn't stand what I was seeing on the campus. I didn't even want to be in education deeply enough to warm a co-ed's ass. I wanted out. Now, would I be happier there now? Maybe. I don't know. You pays your money, you takes your chances. Anyway, I worked with this guy, Phil. And this guy had come up hard scrabble in an urban southern environment, which means he worked at mills, factories. And he was always doing something at home, always fixing something himself. He could do anything. And the advantage was he saved money. And he knew how stuff was done. And I said, why do you do all of this? And he said, Poor folks got poor ways. I'm also reminded of this guy that I worked with at a copper tubing mill. After I left the maritime field, I moved to a copper tubing mill in rural North Carolina in the Piedmont, in the central part of North Carolina. And there was this guy, John S. And he used to wear one of these camo hats for hunting. And on the hat, it had a guy holding a fish at the end of a fishing pole. And it had a guy over here skinning a deer. And the Hank Williams Jr. song line up here, it said, "A country boy can survive." And it's true. If the economy ever collapses, the average urbanite won't know what to do. It may become a dangerous place, but that's a different discussion. But the people who take care of themselves, who take care of their elders, who have a close-knit family, they do much better. Now, white folks, they tend to let the elders fend for themselves. I know this is going down a pig path. I'll try to wrap it up somewhere eventually. But it's like the people in their 30s who look like me think, it's my time. It's about me right now. It's about me doing for my family. They'll say, our parents have their savings. Or they'll make every decision to run across country to make every last dollar far away from their family. I took my first job away from my family. I'm guilty. The other thing affluent, middle-class white folks may say is, well, the old folks want their privacy and their independence. Or the government will take care of mom and dad. And it's really like as if 30-somethings don't realize that one day they'll be 70-somethings. I'd like to explain to you that I've tried to walk my talk. I had a father who took in both his own father and his mother-in-law, neither of whom was easy to deal with. But my grandfather aged out in my home, and my grandmother stayed in the home long enough until she moved in with another old lady, and it ended with my grandmother being farmed out to an old age home when her very affluent doctor son married to a very affluent woman chose to warehouse my grandmother till she laid in her poop one day, and my brothers and I found her and we raised hell. So I decided I would walk whatever talk I'm making. So in 99, 2000, when I built the house I'm in, I built everything with 3.0 handicap doors. And I did it because my father at the time was aged. He had Parkinson's. And it wasn't going to end well. It was going to end with him being in a wheelchair. And we had this one picture of my grandfather that reminded me, you should give an old man time sitting in the backyard, sitting in the sun, reading a newspaper. Well, they don't have newspapers anymore, but you get the drift. So I built everything downstairs with 3.0 doors where you could go right from the garage into the downstairs apartment area. I built it with a handicapped toilet, and I built it with a sitting shower so that if I had to wash my father down, I could get in the shower and help him. So I've tried to walk the talk. My father never lived long enough to need my help, but my father-in-law died in hospice in my home, and I was the person who gave him his last dose of morphine and heard his last intelligible words, which were, "I have no more pain, praise the Lord." Lights out. I've offered the same to my older uncle.